Welcome to Spark Hub. Whoever you are and whatever you're going through, it's my deep-seated belief that stories are what get us through daily struggles and ultimately find new sparks of inspiration in life. So it's my aim with this podcast to create a hub of stories, everything from cautionary tales to quite inspiring feats, all in one place, and much more. Every episode has show notes that dive deeper on the topics we discuss, and if you want an extended experience, please consider signing up for the Spark Hub newsletter for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes stuff. It's also my belief that if no one ever listens to any of these episodes, I can leave behind stories for my kids so that they can find sparks in their own life as they grow up. So now that all that throat clearing is done, let's begin. My name is Alan, and I have a heck of a story for you. In this episode, I've invited someone on that knows nothing about Spark Hub, knows nothing about me, and almost in a way kind of ambush him. His name is Inder. He's a neuroscientist, but actually there's a much deeper story to what we discuss. And frankly, what sparked me to bring him on the podcast was an article he wrote about not overthinking when you're dating. And I'm now back into the dating world, and it's scary. And I sort of go deep with him on a bunch of topics, everything from the spiritual to the empirical, and come up with some fairly interesting observations and sparks. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Inder. An ambush, because I didn't want you to know anything about it. But if I were to summarize a little bit why you and I are sitting in these chairs, it's because this is now season 3 of Spark Hub, and I had the first season was me doing an education podcast for my kids during COVID. That got put on the shelf for a few years. I went through some life circumstantial change, i.e. divorce, and having to deal with all that. So I started another season, audio only, of just me talking about, how I met my ex, which was a wild story, a dating story, and then coming into having kids, being an entrepreneur, launching businesses, and the perfect storm that represents. And so it's kind of like talk about what you know. So that was season 2, and this is season 3. And it's the first time I've used a video output. So we've gone from audio to video. So there's been an evolution, but I didn't want you to know any of that before you sat in that chair, because I want you to be totally not unprepared, but sort of not led by the witness, because today we're going to talk about dating. And I think one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you is I saw an article that you wrote about not overthinking during dating. And I want to get to that, but I think maybe the place to start is what is your background and what do you do exactly?
Sure. So I have a few tools in my kit.
Okay.
So I originally trained as a nutritional therapist. So I did that for a few years. I actually specialized in helping people with chronic fatigue because that's kind of what led me here today, actually. And then I kind of then realized that I wanted to help people with brain issues. So I then retrained as a neuroscientist, a cognitive neuroscientist.
Wow.
And kind of I originally set out in my neuroscience journey to kind of help people with brain fog. But as time's gone on, and after having seen probably in excess of 1,000 patients, I kind of realized that I'm much more interested in the patient's personal story as opposed to their personal health history. So as time's gone on, I've kind of moved away from physiology and more towards psychology. So that's kind of...
hold on, if I understand that correctly, the science and the rigor and the imperial stuff that you used to apply to brain fog, you actually said it's more about the story of the individual than what the scientific imperialistic testing?
In my experience, so there's kind of two aspects to it. In my experience, there's trauma plays a very important role in a lot of chronic disease, especially the kind of the conditions that I was seeing: chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, long COVID, chronic pain to some extent. The research is very kind of apparent that there is almost always some sort of psychological trauma.
That is almost is a marker.
Yes.
So that leads to these things.
It's not the single cause, obviously, but
it's a big factor.
Absolutely.
So you decided to pull on that thread?
Yes.
That is a hell of a pivot. So not only have I ambushed you, you've kind of ambushed me because I know nothing about what you do. So I wanted to get you fresh. Okay, so if we play that back a bit, because I've been fascinated by this, and it's something I've talked about before, is especially when it comes to my kids, what worries me is what seeds are you planting now, good or bad, that can have outcomes in adulthood, good or bad. And that preoccupies me very much, especially around any unresolved trauma, going through a divorce, all these types of things. So that became a focus of mine just as a person. but you're leading a whole life now of study around that. So what do you do? What's a day in your life? How are you applying this? How are you studying?
So I kind of, as I mentioned, I have a very portfolio career. So a few days of the week I'm seeing patients. A few days of the week I'm consulting. A few days of the week I'm working on my PhD.
You're doing your PhD now?
Yes.
And then what topic?
At the moment, it's on brain fog, but I haven't actually decided which path I'm going to take, whether I'm going to approach it from a physiology point of view or psychology, because psychology intertwines into brain fog, certainly in the way it drives brain fog. So I'm still exploring that.
So you're demystifying the fog.
Exactly, yeah.
Is this because, do you have a personal interest in the sense that you want to prevent stuff as you grow older or grow more experienced in life, and you just want to know the toolkit that you can use on yourself? Or do you, I mean, genuinely, you probably want to help people, but by helping others, you help yourself. Let's not kid ourselves.
Absolutely. To be honest with you, I wish I could say it was just purely for my own reasons to prevent future events, but actually it was the other way around for me. I experienced a lot of this. So I experienced chronic fatigue syndrome for my first sort of 20s, for most of my 20s. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And it took many years. Probably I was diagnosed at 22, and I didn't get back on my feet till about 28.
So you were diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome?
Yeah.
At 22?
Yes.
So you got a diagnosis from a doctor, but what route did they take? Was it prescriptive or?
Unfortunately, at that time, even today, there are no real drugs, and even less was known back then. You know, in some ways, long COVID was actually a blessing for many people with chronic fatigue because it accelerated the learning curve for doctors and the interventions. But back then, it was just antidepressants, maybe a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, and kind of, well, you'll get better.
And that's it?
Yeah, and it was kind of very much like, oh, you'll get better, just give it time.
But so how has the toolkit proliferated since then? What's new?
The truth is still not a lot, to be honest. Antidepressants, cognitive behavioral therapy. There is an interesting program that is being researched at the moment called the Gupta program, which is based on this idea that essentially the emotional centers of the brain are hyperactive. And essentially, if we want to try and reduce the symptoms of CFS, we've got to try and interrupt all of these essentially exaggerated thoughts about our own body. So, and the Gupta program is a fantastic intervention. I actually worked as a part of the research team there.
Is there any correlation with the advent of social media and the advent of mobile phones, do you feel?
Interesting question. I think social media does play a very key role in amplifying pre-existing potentially traumas. Trauma is a big word, but I use trauma with a small t. I definitely think social media plays a role in amplifying certain fragmentations, if you like, of our development. You know, I think essentially a lot of us, if we've gone through trauma growing up, whether that's divorce, whether that's more severe issues such as sexual assault, I do think that the personality becomes quite insecure, and social media can drive that, can actually amplify that.
Okay. So I'm now going to take you into a specific area, which is the title of your article, which is about dating. So I saw that article and I thought it was fascinating, but I will butcher it. So why don't you give us the 2-minute version of that article and the themes of it? Because I'd like to tie together everything you just said, and then I'd like to tell you about experiences I'm having and seeing if you can help me. So this is almost like free therapy. Okay. I hope you don't mind.
No, not at all.
Okay, we can send me your invoice later.
Yeah.
But tell me about the article about overthinking and dating.
Yeah, so it's titled How to Stop Overthinking and Dating. And it's I wrote the article essentially because so many people, well, let me actually backtrack. I think overthinking and rumination and worry have just become pervasive in general in life, whether that's about career, finances, romance. And as I mentioned, I was quite sick, and I only started dating when I was about 27, 28. And boy, oh boy, did I kind of make up for lost time. And but I realized quite early on that I found myself overthinking a lot. You know what it's like. You focus on you especially if you don't have a lot of confidence, and you don't have a lot of experience. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
You just focus on yourself, and you're just thinking, oh, what am I? I hope I hope my clothes are good. I hope I'm looking good. I'm hoping I'm sounding good. Oh, I don't think she liked that joke. Oh no, I think she hates me. You know, those kind of, or I don't think she likes me. I think it's over. That's it. This date's over.
Maybe she's just not that into me.
Exactly. So that's kind of why I wrote the article. It's very common. And in essence, overthinking is caused by our overactive stress response system, and also something called the default mode network, which is a part of our brain that's essentially responsible for focusing on ourself, on our thoughts, daydreaming, and the future. But it's self-referential. So it's always kind of comparing past events with our present situation.
In a projective way?
In a projective way, yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. So like, if we were on a date, I'd be thinking, oh God, like this guy reminds me of X, or...
Right. So there's personas at play, there's avatars at play, there's previous characters.
Absolutely.
So you might be punished for the crime of someone that, you can trigger someone because you remind them of someone else.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even though you're not.
And in a nutshell, if I could just say so, in a nutshell, this default mode network is overactive in people who tend to overthink. And essentially in the article, I share how to quieten that down. And the most important kind of takeaway is just being as present as possible by focusing on the other person, which sounds quite radical, but it sounds so simple.
I'm going to give you a radical story. So again, you don't know anything about this podcast, and we've only had a couple of conversations that were work related. Let me give you a story, and just to set the time, this is pre-iPhone and pre-social media. So if you can remember a time when these things don't exist. Vaguely, you're probably a lot younger than me. But rewind to that, I'm 29 years old, and I just moved to the UK, London. A friend of mine back in Canada had done this is the subject of a whole podcast in and of itself, but he basically traded from a paperclip to a house using the internet and suddenly gaining notoriety. So that story I'll tell you another time. But he dared me. He said, what's the biggest thing that you are facing in London, having been here 3 months? And I said, it's a big city, and I just find it hard to date. And I've gone to online dating, and back then it was crude. It was GIFs and blinking hearts and really crude communication tools. And I said, I just wish I could peel the layers back and get to know someone authentically. Because I feel if you can connect authentically, you can build a whole relationship together. So for example, my parents met in the UK. They then went to Canada before I was born. They traveled the world. They had all kinds of experiences together, and they're still together to this day. So I think shared experience is helpful. But how do you overcome that? So that was the exam question of the day, right? Pre-iPhone, pre-social media, me in London, fresh off the boat, as it were, trying to figure all this out. So I'll cut to the end because I ended up setting up a blog and going around the world on dates because my brother worked for an airline. So I was kind of just flying around trying to do these authentic dates. And it was like, let's not go to a movie, but let's do something where let's climb a mountain together. Let's go on a walk together. Let's jump out of a plane together. And one date, I met a woman underwater, so we couldn't speak. It was a scuba diving date. So I could sit here all day and tell you about that. But at the time, I was just trying to break barriers. And eventually, I ended up meeting someone, cut to wedding, cut to children, cut to mortgage. And then 3 years ago, we separated, divorced, and now we're living apart, but we're still trying to maintain a co-parenting relationship. So I've just given you a very narrow snapshot of a story that I went through. But to your point, I was just trying to, at the time, the intent was to overcome barriers, confidence barriers in me and the person I might meet, creating situations where authenticity bubbles to the top rather than, at the time, clanky dating apps. So I've come out of a 16-year relationship. I've lost a lot of confidence. I'm now dating again. I'm trying to date. And I suddenly hear that everyone's doing it on their phones. So cut to me setting up an account on some dating sites. Most of them you have to pay for. So it doesn't seem to me that there's any incentive on behalf of the platform providers to move you along very quickly. It's a subscription service, and I know all about that as a businessman. And so I go onto these apps, and they're all more or less looking the same. You swipe. You get a profile up, and it's like a card. You move it. It's a bit like blackjack, really. You're hoping to get an ace at 21, right? So I'm on these apps now, me, 49 years old, having, used technology my whole life, but never for dating. I was on the dating apps for a month. I had a couple dates, which we'll talk about, but actually I found the whole experience quite dehumanizing. So everything you just said played for me. I suddenly, okay, I don't have confidence. Will she like me? Who is she? What's her background? And suddenly all my thoughts of what's happened to me in the past, I had to start finding ways to overcome them. What if this happens again? What if I go through this again? What if, and I had to go quiet, just try it, see it do. So before I get to a couple of my stories, what can you offer me as in terms of insight of using dating apps? What experience do you have with them? What have you noticed? How do they play into or play off of everything you've just discovered about the nervous system that can go into self-preservation mode in a world where someone could be AI, in a world where someone could be catfishing you? It just feels, to me, risky. However, there is a bit of a success story, which I'll tell you in a minute, but okay. I'll stop there.
So in a nutshell, in my experience with social media, with dating apps, I don't necessarily believe that they are the best place to meet someone who's coming from the best place themselves. It's very transactional. It can be very fickle, and it can be very tedious, as we've all experienced.
Great words. And it feels to me like a gambling. You're the neuroscientist, so tell me if I've got this wrong. There's a part of your brain that is triggered by gambling and the reward system and the big ones coming. The jackpot's one roll away.
Exactly.
And it feels to me like my anxiety levels went through the roof on these apps because I'm just like hearting people and moving along, and I just went, phew.
Yeah. And you just become more increasingly stimulated. And, there's often a discussion about dopamine and dopamine detox. Yeah. It's a real hot topic. And people think that dopamine is a reward chemical, but it's actually released in anticipation of an event. Serotonin is actually what's released, and some other, and endorphins.
So chemically, what is the device doing to us in terms of the lead up and then the anticipation?
It's teaching us about, essentially, it's giving us a false sense of anticipation.
Is that how dolphins are trained?
I don't know. I'm not a zoologist. Oh, okay. I don't know about dolphins.
It's a random question, but yeah, I thought I'd ask.
I wonder. But in learning, to some extent, like Pavlov's dogs. If you remember that experiment.
The Pavlovian experiment.
Yeah, anticipation.
The salivation.
Reward. Yeah, it is.
Okay. Well, let me tell you what I did to mitigate the circumstances. So remember, I once started a blog to find my wife, and I went around the world as a way to mitigate dating sites. Cut to today. I'm now in the blackjack game that is online dating. So what I noticed is the way it works is, let's say I see your profile and I heart you, or you see mine and you heart me. If we both heart, it opens a channel, but the woman gets to make the first move. I don't know. So just, full transparency, I only use straight websites.
Okay.
So that's not to describe, it's just who I am. So anyway, I heart, they heart. It opens a channel, woman makes the first move. Now, what I noticed on the communication tool is there was a call option, there was a video call option, and there's actually a voice note option. So I thought, you know what? I've put in my profile, I don't want a pen pal. I'm not here to text forever. So the first thing I do is someone messages me, ping, voice record. This is what I sound like. My photos are real. Could we just arrange a call? No expectations. Would you believe me if I told you about 60 to 70% of the conversation ended there? And the excuses I got from some of the women were, I don't like my own voice. I don't like my accent. I don't know you. You might try to control me. And I'm thinking, the worst way to communicate with someone is by text, because you can't read intent. 90% of a message is body language, right? You cannot read intent. You cannot read sarcasm. You cannot read jokes. Obviously, emojis have helped that. But it is the bluntest instrument to communicate with someone. So I try to level up to at least an audio message, because don't forget, in the old days, maybe you don't remember these, I used to sit on the phone with someone for hours.
A landline, yeah.
Yeah, and I used to coil the cord and take it around the corner so people couldn't hear. And if my mom and dad picked up, I'd tell them to hang up. Whole different era. Anyway, so it's interesting for me, and I don't know if this is scientific, that's not empirical, but scientifically, I used a tool called audio to eliminate tire kickers. And amazingly, I found out some people were AI, some people were shy, some people were not confident, some people made false profiles. But then I ended up getting some dates as well. And the goal was to meet someone in person, because that is the ultimate goal. Even if it doesn't go well, I want to practice. I want to be a human again. I want to get out the house. I don't want to be alone in the dark swiping through. But believe it or not, so I'll stop there for a second, but I'd love your view on that. Like, what is a good way, I know you've already said apps aren't the best way, but are there any good ways to try and edge around and gain confidence by using the functionality of the apps in your experience?
So as you were talking, I was reminded of a section in my article where I talk about. I think it's my last statement, which is rely on your deep inner knowing, rely on your instincts. So there's a couple studies that came out of America where essentially if you imagine players, I don't actually play cards, but I think it was blackjack, and the dealer was handing out these cards, and these players were hooked up to heart rate monitors, to skin monitors, and what they found is that the cards that were dealt, so obviously the cards are face down, so the players didn't know the hand they received, but the players who received the worst hands, their heart rate went up, and they started sweating more. So I'm a big believer. This is not necessarily grounded in the neuroscience, but I am a big believer in using your instincts as much as possible. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes you'll see a profile and you go, I'm not sure, and then you meet them in real life and you're like, oh, this person's great. But even then, as you get to know them, maybe that kind of small, tiny little seed of doubt starts to maybe play out as the relationship goes on. So my biggest piece of advice is actually follow your gut, follow your instinct.
But how can you follow your gut if the information you're receiving is limited and contrived and crafted, as would be a profile?
My recommendation is just to assume it's all bullshit.
Really?
Yeah.
So start there.
Start there.
So the bar is high, and people have got to overcome it. So my tactic of saying, I'm only going to do voice notes until we meet, what would you say? Good idea?
It's a great filter. Absolutely. I mean, I actually take it one step further. I used to send a message and just say, hi, this is who I am. Basically not looking for time wasters. Do you want to just grab a coffee? Because it really does filter it out.
Okay, let's move on. Okay. Because I did the voice note. Again, I'm new at dating. It's atrophy that I'm scared of. I haven't dated in 16 years. So it's not like riding a bike, I don't think. So anyway, I did that tactic. Then I had 4 real dates, but something interesting developed. And I want to, again, get your opinion. So I got to the point like you. I used your card. Let's have a drink. Let's have a coffee. Let's go out. Let's not jump out of a plane together. Let's not do all the stuff I did in the past. Let's try just the old school way of dating and see what happens in this new world. I went out on one date, and the woman I met, we had a great conversation. We had some drinks. And then this is where I started to get a little bit lost about the rules of dating. So we're in person. We've had a great date. The bill comes. I go to reach for it like a chivalrous gentleman. She stops and says, I want to see you again. So I'll pay the bill. You get the next one. I said, fair enough. That's cool. Then the next time we had 2 drinks. So I went out the second one. And then I paid that bill. But then to cut a long story short, that didn't go anywhere, just fizzled out. So I go on another date with someone different. Again, voicemail to voicemail. Eventually we graduate to a video call. And then we end up meeting in person. So these points of escalation, we meet in person. Wonderful. We sit down, the bill comes. And I say, I'll pay it. She goes, nope, we have to split it. It's modern dating. We split everything down the middle. I said, okay, a signal of equality. I'm cool with that. So we each paid half the bill. Fizzled out, didn't see her again. So now date number 3. Now this is where I'd really, really want to get your view as a neuroscientist because it fascinated me. So the woman looked beautiful in her photos, really nice, great chat, great voice notes. We graduated up to video, everything's checking out. So I said, I'd love to meet you. And she said, me too. So I said, I'll tell you what, where are you based? And we were just figuring stuff out. And she said, I'm near a certain location in London. I said, oh, I'm only 10 minutes down the road on Tuesday. Let's meet somewhere. Why don't you designate a spot and I'll meet you there? She chose the spot. We met, we had drinks. While we were having drinks, I said, what are you doing for lunch? Because she was on her lunch break at work. And she said, oh, I'm going to get a sandwich. I said, well, there's food menus here. Would you like to get some food while we're having a drink? And she said, yes. So we ordered food, no problem. The bill came. Now remember, this is my 3rd date. Date number 1, I was told I couldn't pay the bill. Date number 2, I split it. So I'm still figuring out the norms here, and I'm new, and I'm uncomfortable. The bill comes, I said, I can get it, or I'm happy to split it. Why don't you tell me? Gave her a choice. And she looked at me and she went, let's split it. I said, great. This is where it gets interesting and into your realm. A couple hours later, I get a voice note. And she says, I just want to be upfront. I'm a very blunt person. I believe in being honest. She goes, I have a couple reflections on our date. I just wanted to share them with you. Number one, I think a man should always take charge. And I don't like the fact that you didn't choose the location where we were to meet. Number two, I don't like the fact that you forced me to eat or that you forced me into a decision to have lunch off the menu. Hold on. Number three, when the bill came, I would expect a man to pay for the bill. But I just wanted to let you know that's how I think. And I said, okay, that's interesting. So I replied with a voice note to say, thank you for telling me. On the location choice, I felt that because you didn't know me and I was meeting you near where you worked, for your own security, I felt you should choose a location that's comfortable for you. So that was my intent. Number two, when I asked you if you wanted to eat, you seemed happy and you pointed at the menu and chose something you seemed to like. And then when the bill came, I thought it was only courteous to give a choice because of previous experiences I've had. She then replied and said something very interesting. But before I tell you what she said, what do you think was going on with the fact that she sort of were given choices and then seemed to almost have buyer's regret later? Do you see any correlation there?
Well, as you were talking, immediately kind of insecurity and fear kind of pops out in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to add, she seemed confident the whole time. There was no interruption in her speech. Eye contact was great. Everything came across confident, which gave me the confidence to ask if she wanted to eat, ask if she wants to play a bill. Yeah. But then she had almost buyer's remorse.
Yeah. I was going to say as well, confident people are often some of the most insecure people as well.
Okay. Do you want to know what she told me?
I'm very curious, yeah.
She replied to my message to thank me for responding. And then she said, I should probably let you know I'm neurodiverse.
Ah, okay.
And then she said, so what happens is I often cannot advocate for myself in the moment. And then over time, I replay things in my head. And I wanted a different outcome in each of those scenarios. But now that I've shared it with you, I'm confident I'd like to see you again. So why I think that's interesting is because she's basically saying she has a delayed reaction. So what you just said is maybe it's a confidence thing, but she's not. She has said to me, and I agree with her, she didn't lack confidence. In her job, she's a leader. She controls teams. She's very dominant. But she said when she comes out of work, she wants a man to take care of her, essentially, which is a bit old school, and that's cool. But I found it fascinating that she gave me feedback, as it were. And then it led to a conclusion, even because I was polite about it. She came to a conclusion. She said, I'm neurodiverse. So when I date, when I'm not in a work situation, when I'm not in a situation that I'm in control of, I often don't act in the moment as I want to. And therefore I have regrets later. Now, we didn't see each other again after that, not because of that, because it turned out she had 5 kids.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I kind of said, look, that's more of an integration issue from my perspective, because I got 2 kids. And anyway, so again, not disparaging her. You know, we went through the steps. We met on a dating app. We escalated from text to speech to whatever. But coming back to what you said, there was a confidence aspect, but there's also a neurodiverse aspect. And what I've read recently is neurodiversity there's still a big mystery as to what causes it, but there's a whole field of study around trauma and latent trauma and things that cause people to bottle things up and have a delayed reaction and then almost spin the narrative because they can apply an old trauma to someone new, which is what we discussed at the beginning. So what advice do you have to me in this crazy dating world based on what you've heard so far? Should I pay the bill?
So it's very interesting. So I can understand why a lot of women, want a man to show leadership, show initiative, choose the restaurant, be assertive. But at the same time, I do believe, certainly in the initial stages, things should be as equal as possible.
Oh, okay. What makes you think that?
Girls hate me for that. I've annoyed many girls.
But is that your filter to see if it's equal?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, but I found the girls, I've got to be careful how I say this, but the girls worth keeping are the ones who at least offer to put their card on the table. Not necessarily the ones who insist, but at least they offer.
So there's an offer, but what's the intent? Oh, because this is something I learned in Britain. Okay, coming from outside of Britain, very, very often people say something as a polite thing, but they don't mean it.
Yes,
and that took me forever to learn. It's like, yeah, okay, North America, I'm doing that. Okay, yeah, cool, got it. Whereas here, it's like it's a little bit of a game. Don't, no, put it away. It's okay. Yeah, there's got to be a few. It's like badminton, you know, and then it's okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so equality. I agree. And I think one thing I've tried to do in my dating now is take a walk with me. Take a walk with me. Let's go somewhere. Let's just walk around and chat, look at stuff.
You mean as a first date?
As a first date or a second date or,
yeah.
You know, and so to come to the success story, I left a voice note for someone, didn't hear from them for 2 weeks, thought nothing of it. Just before I canceled my subscription, she came back and said, "This is the most authentic thing I've ever heard on a dating site. I'd love to meet." And then video calls followed. And so it's, you know, I'm not saying I'm dating, but there's someone that is sort of come into focus a little bit. We're still figuring out how stuff works. But just to say, it was based on a lot of equality, which is what you said. There are other dates I've had, even just phone dates, where the woman's right away put down her cards on the table. I need a man to take care of me. I need a man to take care of my kids. I need a man to do this. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It's just I'm not in that game because it's, as I say, it's an integration issue. I've got my own kids.
But if I could just say something else, you know, I understand that at least she's being honest, but there's an element of transaction over connection. I do appreciate when you've got kids and a mortgage and a house, you know, you've got to provide. But I just don't think it's in its essence. You know, a long-term relationship is ultimately about connection and you know, shared values and wanting to be there for each other and supporting each other in all the ways as much as possible. I don't think it should start from.
No, I agree.
But a lot of women do.
Well, what I wonder then is because we're on these dating apps, it's almost like there's an artificial element of time. If this guy's not, I can swipe and I can move on to the next thing. And that goes both ways, by the way, both genders, because I don't know how many times I've been swiped. I don't know how many times I've been liked or whatever, but it's just it feels like a bottomless deck of cards and it feels dehumanizing. So I think now, and this is statistics I've read recently, the dating industry generally is on a decline. A lot of people are not using the apps anymore. A lot of people aren't joining. They're not subscribing. There's all these sort of free services coming up now, community-based ones, interest-based ones. I've been invited to, you know, singles who hike, singles who bike, singles who whatever. So I'm kind of going, right, well, now I don't have time to keep track of all these groups.
It's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job. And so I wonder if AI can take care of it for me or...
Yeah, I wonder. I wonder. Yeah, if you look at, you know, some dating companies like Bumble, their stock prices just go through the floor. And I think partially because, you know, like you've highlighted, people want authenticity, and dating apps just don't provide that. In my experience, it's just very transactional, very robotic. And I'm a big believer in. I know it's difficult when you're busy professionally, you've got kids and things, but I do find. I think a lot of people kind of systematize their dating life like it's just another job. It's a process, and I think to some extent that needs, you know, it can be helpful. But I believe also in just trusting the universe, trusting life, setting out the right intention.
I think it's also about choosing your tribe.
Yeah,
you know, I think the one thing I would say now at the age of 49, having not dated in 16 years, having been married with 2 kids, is it is scary. It is disheartening. However, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. So the one thing you can control is your time. What if you spent an hour in a group? What if you spent an hour with a walking crew? And funny enough, this is one of the craziest phone dates I've had. I had a couple conversations with a girl, and there was definitely a spark. There was definitely banter, conversation, you know, tennis, if you will, verbal tennis. And she said something interesting to me. She says, I usually end up dating people or referring them to my friends. So she's like a trafficker. And she says, even if we don't work out, I probably know someone that... And I went, okay, that's kind of new. It's almost like a win-win scenario, which is difficult, right? It fizzled out anyway, but I just felt that was, I've never seen that before. A woman said, I'll date you, and if I don't like you, I'll pass you to, not don't like you, but if there's no chemistry, sorry, I've used the wrong words, edit that out.
You've got to be very secure.
Yeah. I think she said, if there's no chemistry, I'll see if I can hook you up. She seemed to be enthralled by matchmaking. So look, the other way to do it is the old school way. I have a lot of friends I grew up with that were of Indian origin, and they had arranged marriages, or Muslim origin, they had arranged marriages, and the elders of the village would help choose a partner, and it seems those last. So they trust the judgment of the elders. But now our elders in this world are AI and algorithm, and they're just trying to figure out a pattern. And what I find wrong with algorithms is it tries to get to know you, but in an environment that's artificial. So it's synthetic and clinical. So all to say that I don't have any success stories so far. I'm one of the people who might be crashing the Bumble stock because I've decided to pull my subscription, and that's not a reflection on them because frankly, all the apps I've used have the same interface now. I don't see any differentiation. The only differentiation I'm starting to see is groups where you join and hopefully you do stuff. But even then, the convenience of the apps doesn't transfer to groups because you've got to keep track of threads and people tagging each other, and that you just kind of switch off to that. So anyway, I don't think we found a solution to this, but if I've learned anything or you sparked anything from this conversation is there is a science to this. It's not exact. And it seems to me the big quest that that you've done personally is how to navigate out of the fog and hopefully find something on the other side. But I think dealing with root causes seems to be a good place to spend some time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was the big conclusion from your article in dating?
This might sound counterintuitive or just stupidly simple, but just be curious.
Is that all?
Just be curious. Curiosity about somebody immediately shuts down that default network that I mentioned. That's very self-referential.
Okay.
If you see someone's profile or read something on their profile, or you just see someone in real life, and there's just that little kind of seed of curiosity of like, I wonder, there's something intriguing about this person. That's all you need. And then you start having a chat with them and you just keep asking questions. And we know, at least certainly in the short term, the most successful daters are the ones who are the most curious, who just ask questions and listen. That's it. Just ask follow-up questions.
Really?
Yeah. That is the biggest single biggest predictor of early stage dating.
Well, I'm going to reveal something to you. This was a bit of an inside joke, but I'm going to let you have it. Someone said, what type of girl do you like? And I said, Cali girls. And someone said, what do you mean girls from California? I said, they could be, but C-A-L-I. And what I'd done is a female friend of mine was helping me try to craft a profile and what do I look for? And we came up with Cali, C-A-L-I. Curious, adventurous, loyal, and intelligent. And I said, these are attributes I find attractive in someone else, and I hope someone would find attractive in me. And I know it sounds ridiculous to cook everything down to an anagram. To cook everything down to an acronym, but that's what one drunken night with a friend led to as we were trying to map out. Because how do you write your own profile? How do you write your own review? You don't. You need outside help. But I said, what's the one thing that you know about me? And she said, you're so curious. And I said, okay, cool. Well, maybe that's an attribute. But there are people out there who are shut in. So,
which is okay. They're shut in, but at the end of the day, the person that you're genuinely attracted to, there should be there should be still curiosity about them as much as possible. And kind of if they're not sparking curiosity within you, you got to maybe ask yourself, why am I here?
Yeah.
Because then you start falling into that realm of transaction again.
Yeah.
And like I say, authenticity and curiosity are just the two core ingredients.
And then it becomes about transactional value. So the value is high if they're curious, and yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, look, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your backstory because I didn't know any of it. And I'm quite curious to see what this is going to spark next. But I agree. I think I just have to remain true to myself, which is that at heart, I'm a curious person. And hopefully there's someone else out there who's just as curious.
100%.
It's a question of finding the route to them.
Yeah. If I could just leave you with an anecdote.
Yeah.
As time's gone on, especially kind of having recovered from chronic illness, I think I've certainly gravitated towards spirituality a lot. And I am a believer in having an intention and kind of then, intensely visualizing it and then releasing it. And there's a lot of work on visualization. There are a few neuroscientists out there who are just focusing on kind of visualization and manifestation. But I remember, I don't know if you remember Michael Jackson, famous singer.
Yes, of course.
Poor guy's going through a bit of controversy again. But
well, he's been dead and he's got 3 new cases.
I know, crazy. Anyway, that side, I mean, one thing the world can't take away from him is just how beautifully talented he was. Mm-hmm. And I remember he did a documentary with Martin Bashir. I don't know if you remember that, back in the early 2000s. And Martin asked him, how do you create your music? And he said, well, if I just sat down at the studio and said to myself, I'm going to write the best track ever, it wouldn't happen. But what he will say is, I want to create a great song with a bass line, with a great bass line. And then I'll just let it go. And then one day, Billie Jean pops into his head. And the reason I share that is because it just comes back to this idea of visualizing or just having an intention, like a genuine intention, wanting something for the right reasons, and then letting it go, completely surrendering it. And you'd be amazed at what life can give you once you've let it go. And I find a lot of daters really want something so intensely, they almost repel it.
So they strangle it in many ways.
Yeah, in many respects. They almost repel it because they want it so badly. It's kind of almost like a baby, when if you smother love it, you could potentially, kill it. It's almost like that.
That's an interesting anecdote. And that comes from your profession, your area of investigation, and just personal experience.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, having helped over 1,000 people with chronic issues, I always say acceptance, firstly, of their situation, because a lot of these people are bedbound for years, decades. So acceptance of their situation. They spend a lot of time kind of fighting it. Acceptance, and then surrendering their intention of getting better, surrendering the trying to find someone instead of trying to find it, just surrender it out and kind of let it go. And miracles end up happening for them.
That's amazing. That gives me hope. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Spark Hub podcast. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't be shy to look in the show notes for a deeper dive, and also consider signing up for our newsletter so that you can get the inside scoop straight to your inbox.